So, last we left off with the My Hero Academia story, the likes of Endeavor, Eraserhead, Present Mike, Crust, and a few other heroes had finally entered the fray of the laboratory battle. Here, they would face off against the incredibly powerful High-End Nomu, particularly having a difficult time with the especially astute female one, but nevertheless managed to deal some major damage to the incubation tank of Shigaraki. And with this preceding chapter, we pick up right from there as Endeavor looked to his fellow top 5 hero, Mirko, and good lord, has she been brutalized. The amount of blood loss and pain she's endured during this time must have been immense. In seeing her in such a state, Endeavor decided to cauterize her wounds, forcefully mending over her flesh with his flames, offering her some sort of flame-printed cloth for her to bite down on. Now, I don't recognize this thing at all, but I wonder if it has any significance, or the number one hero just carries around flame-printed hankies in case of whatever. But yeah, Mirko would bite down on it as the process would be immensely painful, but would continue to warn Endeavor that Shigaraki was still back there. It was then that Endeavor would reflect on just how long Mirko had been fighting the high ends by her lonesome, which turned out to be just around like 5 minutes or so. Now, to have things quantified in such a sense is pretty crazy. Like, it was a pretty action-packed 5 minutes to have. And at first, it sounds like it might be a little underwhelming just being 5 minutes and all, but honestly, to have gone blow for blow with these things at all, for even a single minute, is a feat all its own. Not to mention how impressive it is that the heroes managed to conduct this entire operation over the course of what couldn't have been more than 10 minutes total. Endeavor would continue that Mirko should just add this to the debt that he owes her for saving his ass from Dabi back in Kyushu, so she'd better keep on living. To which she rebutted that he didn't owe her anything. And man, Mirko continues to impress, because the sheer fact that she could talk through this ordeal is mind-blowing in of itself. This stuff is not easy. This is some painful shit. And I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I am really glad that Horikoshi did what he did with the character of Endeavor at this point, because I honestly have a pretty hard time picturing the old Endeavor in a predicament like this. I'm sure he'd still do this, but it's a little bit easier to bear with this new demeanor he has, I suppose. But just then, the female high-end would expose herself and loom over him, recognizing him to be the number one hero. Now enticed by the idea of facing him, she approached with the thought that doing so would make her feel even more amazing than she already did. And once again, we still don't know where these creatures draw their knowledge from. Personal memories, or having been informed and familiarized with the top heroes, as from a production standpoint, they would probably be the most likely to face such powerful creations. But for me though, with her knowing him to be the number one hero, I'd have to doubt the personal memory concept, as Endeavor has only been number one for so long, effectively placing a limited time window for this particular villain's mentality to have been harvested and built around. And I'd like to think that their production process was a bit more extensive than that. But anyways, the fight would wage on as Crust and the others would receive a message from Mirko stating that Shigaraki was in a capsule just beyond their location, adding that the chamber he was in would probably have a means of activation for him similar to how things were for the high ends, that he mustn't be allowed to wake up as he's much more than a small-time thug at this point, which I thought was already established by the proceedings and what he had already done. I mean, the sphere of influence that this guy possesses is ridiculous. Like, going from the beginning of the story till now, it is crazy how much power Shigaraki has at his disposal. And maybe she just said this in regards to his power output. And although this isn't exactly the time where you would expect this sort of thing, I gotta add that the fact that Mirko's speech bubble has little bunny ears is thoroughly adorable. But yeah, these Nomu are finally taking a beating, to the point where Kid Buu was over here just panicking. Seeing as how on account of Eraserhead's presence in this fight, they were unable to use their quirks, despite having been bestowed such unbelievable fighting capabilities, they can't really tap into much of it. And I kind of feel for this Nomu, to be honest with you. Like, Really and truly, they cannot catch a break. It's either they're all jumping one person, so you can't really get a grasp on just how much they're capable of individually, or they're the ones being jumped and a similar predicament occurs. But on the opposite side of the fight, in recounting the words of Rocklock prior, Eraserhead figured that further backup would be on their way in a matter of seconds. However, with the sheer volatility of the beasts they were up against, a few seconds would be more than enough for them to be overwhelmed, should the Nomu be provided the opportunity. He knew that the female high-end who'd been actively avoiding his gaze was probably in pursuit of Endeavor at this point, but couldn't press onwards himself as he still had the one in front of him to worry about. Going on to further instruct Present Mike and X-Less, the I-Gun hero, to go deal with Shigaraki's situation. Now, I-Gun hero, really? Is that the point we're at where we have to give like lesser characters these stupid names? The I-Gun hero, wow. Yeah, anyways, this would lead to Kid Buu getting in their way, and with that, I want to talk a bit about the growth of these Nomu. So the whole thing was that they were being released prematurely. Yet over the course of only 5 minutes, have each grown immensely size-wise, to the point where they tower over the 6'1" Present Mike several times over, and their capacity for speech has improved dramatically. So should we be satisfied with the power of these things? I honestly don't know. I mean, Kid Buu quite literally says here that his body still hasn't come back to life, which I'd imagine is a weird way of saying that they aren't at full capacity even still. Maybe he's saying this in regards to the fact that his quirk has been erased. I don't know, but if this is him talking about the fact that they're all not at 100% just yet, it's a little weird. Like, I don't know, these high-end are supposed to be the peak of the Nomu experiments. This is the whole Nomu project cultivated into these set individuals. So for us to, once again, I mean, I feel like we've been talking about this several times over the course of these weeks, but for them to once again be reiterated that they are not at full capacity is a little disappointing, especially from a fan of these villains and their endeavors and such, no pun intended. So I'm really curious how you guys feel about the high ends. Like, please talk to me in the comments about that, because I'm curious if I'm in the minority here, feeling a little, I don't know, strangely. I'm not too upset about it, I wouldn't say, but I feel weird in knowing that these guys aren't at full capacity. And I feel like the story of My Hero Academia, when it comes to percentages and stuff, is a little wonky. Like Deku talking about 8%, one for all, and 2% and 10%. It's always just a little janky. So to have this be perpetuated in the regards of the high ends is a little weird as well. And although I'm not too certain on all that, I am certain that Crust pulled a Captain America here and threw a shield-like projectile at this Kid Buu Nomu and pushed it right out of the way, allowing these two to go on ahead. Meanwhile, we receive a bit of monologue from the Doctor, which is always pretty insightful. Now, the incubation chamber was in really poor state, however he does denote that the data remained intact. And at this point, despite Shigaraki only being half-baked, the Doctor decided to wake him up before any more fluid leakage could occur, as he wallowed over the current state of the dream he and All For One had shared. But just as he raised his hand to awaken Shigaraki and flip that switch, Present Mike would go absolutely stupid crazy. I know this dude gets slept on heavily, but please let this voice be a wake-up call. His quirk is ridiculously strong. The Doctor got uplifted by its sheer force alone, and the pod was decimated. Forget leakage, all the fluid was absolutely blown away along with Shigaraki, as the Doctor's ears would bleed from this onslaught. And boy, my guy Yamada is about the business. He would just wind up his fist and cracked straight into the face of the Doctor, checking to be sure that he wasn't dealing with yet another fake, all the while reflecting on the memory of his friends, Shirakumo and Aizawa respectfully, as they were all children. Now, this attack was called DJ Punch, and I've always just wondered why Horikoshi decides to label things like this with special names when it's literally just a punch, which just reminds me of Red Counter from Kirishima. But yeah, President Mike would go on to say that that one was for making Aizawa cry, which is that real ride or die content that I love to see. From here, X-Less would go and check on Shigaraki, who apparently was not breathing and had no heartbeat. The doctor would then explain that he was in a state similar to death, which was intended to allow for him to withstand the burden of the process better, and that the capsule was for the sake of facilitating, preserving, and reviving him. Now, with tears waterfalling from his eyes, he said that he was only living for the sake of the boy Shigaraki. And from here, a busload of even more heroes would flood into the area, like Eraserhead said only a few seconds later, and would mob onto the High-End Nomu as the doctor exclaimed that it was all over now. As we see Endeavor pull up and rip the top portion of the female Nomu's head off, as the rest of her body was bound by the others. The doctor would then continue that the Lord of Evil's dream would die, as we received a shot of both Shigaraki and All for One within Tartarus. Now, that is the end of the chapter, but wow, what a chapter it was. This is major. This is some major stuff here. Like, going from this point onwards, the story is going to be quite different, I'd like to think. Maybe not in regards to Shigaraki and All for One and their plans. Like, I have a very hard time believing that Shigaraki would undergo this process and just be brain dead and just pop out unable to do anything really. But this is the end for some of these high ends. And this could very well be the end of the Nomu experiments if the doctor is in fact captured from this point onwards. But with that being said, maybe I'm tripping, maybe I am just seeing things, maybe I'm just seeing what I want to see. But when I look at All for One, what I see is a smile. This man looks like he is very pleased. He is smiling about something. And I don't know, I feel like Horikoshi, if anything, would not draw him smiling just for the sake of smiling. As far as we know, there is no way for him to use his quirk within Tartarus. So he shouldn't be aware of what's going on to any degree. But the fact that he's smiling is ominous, and I feel like it's just Horikoshi doing a bit of teasing, a bit of foreshadowing to whatever insanity is to come. This first act of the war, this first side of the war, I feel like this is only the beginning because we haven't seen our main character or our top three, our big three for Class 1A in forever. We haven't seen them at all during this arc. And I have a very hard time believing this arc is just going to be the adult heroes making short work of the villain side and then it's just done. There's no way Horikoshi built up several arcs, built up the league for so long only to do this to them. I cannot believe that. Although the villains are getting bodied, they are getting bullied at this point. The high ends have been effectively slaughtered. We have Twice, who has literally died here. And the heroes haven't really sustained too much. It looks like Mirko and Hawks will both walk away from this fine. So yeah, at this very moment, I am unsure of how the villains will bounce back, but I am quite sure that they will. I don't imagine that this will be the end for them. Hopefully we finally, through this, get our prison break arc or something along those lines. I want to see Tartarus walls fall. I need the old guard to enter the fray once more. I'm very curious what that would do to society and what that would be like. But yeah, the villains need a W in some regard, in some capacity. They need a proper W, and just to get out of this trend of L's that they've been receiving. But yeah, that was the chapter. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the chapter and our coverage of it. And unfortunately, the manga will be on another week's hiatus, as it won't be releasing until May 10th. But thankfully, by sticking around, you have this channel to hold you over, because when it comes to bringing you some of the best My Hero Academia content on the platform, Plot Armor has you covered. As always, I am Slice of Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching, and have an awesome day. I love you.